There we go. Welcome to Salute Your Sports, Common Enchev with Drew Brackett and Tom Castleman. Behind the scenes here, we've been going through some technical issues, trying to figure out the best way to do our podcast. For those that don't know us, we are the best of friends from college, and we had our own sports radio show in college for 2 hours every Saturday, 12 to 2. It was called Salute Your Sports, where the three of us just bantered sports. And this was while we were going to Mizzou, the top journalism school. Hence, Drew's wearing his Mizzou gear. So
Yeah.
well prepared. So that's how we started. And we had the idea of, let's reunite the show 7 years later, guys.
The marvels of modern technology allowing us to do so across, two of us near Chicago, Illinois, and then Drew on the East Coast. So a whole nother time zone. So it's fantastic we're able to do this in this day and age.
Yeah, it's good to see you guys. And, now common knows there's an Eastern time zone and people live in it.
Yeah, so it's 2:42 here in Naperville, Illinois. Over in North Carolina, Drew, it's 3:42. So
it is. So what a concept, right?
Yeah, we're looking to do this Tuesdays or Wednesdays most weeks in the afternoon. Hopefully none of us have dentist appointments like Drew today.
My dentist now, real quick, my dentist, I sat down and she said, "Oh, you're a Mizzou fan." I said, "Well, yeah." She's like, "Why?" I was like, "Well, I went there." She's like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense then." She's like, "Oh, I went to Kansas." I was like, "Oh.
That's not good." Did you guys see
graduated in 2013 when we did comedy.
Wow.
How about that?
That's pretty good. Did you see the Kansas-Mizzou basketball border war has been postponed because of COVID-19 to next year?
Yes. But my dentist and I were talking about the games in 2012. Remember the last game at Allen Fieldhouse? Mizzou had a huge lead and blew it.
Choked?
Yes. Well, the last game at Mizzou Arena was epic, of course, and Mizzou won.
Marcus Denman.
Yes,
Marcus Denman went crazy down the stretch.
Yes.
Drew, were you in for an extra rigorous cleaning knowing that you were a Mizzou fan? Did your dentist give like a little extra scrub, a little extra pick action on your cleanup?
Well, thankfully, so it wasn't the hygienist, it was the dentist, the gal after, right? And she gave me 2 cavities, so I have to go back.
So next
Jayhawk
round,
fan.
Yes.
Next round, be prepared. And just so you know, Drew, after you get your cavity work, you can't talk well for a couple hours.
Oh, well then we can't do the show then that day. Watch out.
Well, it takes about 1 hour. It's not the rest of the day. Speaking of Mizzou, I just noticed this. Look at this. So for those that don't know, Drew is a sports radio producer, and I've been a TV sports reporter anchor, kind of in between jobs at the moment. But here's actually a picture of me talking about the Mizzou Tigers. I most recently worked at a CBS station in Columbia, Missouri area, and it says record night. This is the night that they played Chicago State, the worst defensive team in college, pro, or high school basketball history.
Where are we looking here?
Can you see it? Right here?
Oh, I see you. I don't see the record breaking or whatever, but I do see Common back there.
I think it says record night. So
I see the HT. You know what? It might.
Yeah. Well, if I duck, you see my brother and his fiance, so I'm trying to cover that up.
Oh, of course you are. That's not surprising. But you bring up Chicago State. And a couple of years ago, I think in 2018, my roommate went to Tulane. And Tulane actually had a longer losing streak in basketball in conference play than Chicago State.
Wow.
And Chicago State that year won about 4 or 5 games out of
right. Well, now I don't remember the exact year, but Mizzou scored like well over 100 points. I can't remember how many exactly against Chicago State, but the last time they had scored that many points was against Chicago State in the 90s. So
wow.
Chicago State has a clear history of not playing defense.
That was in 2019.
Yeah, so
91 to 33. Goodness.
What was it?
91 to 33. What a game.
Was that 2019? The end of 2019?
Yeah, it was December 30th, 2019. So it was the 1920 season.
Right. So I covered that game. I was there shooting it, and then later did the recap the next day
You were
on the air.
leading scorer for the Missouri Tigers that night.
It was Torrance Watson. He tied a Mizzou Arena record with 8 3-pointers. And in case you don't know, Torrance Watson is extremely streaky, and most of the time he's ice cold. And they claim him to be a 3-point shooter, but he shoots like 30%. Well, this is one of those games where he got his percentages up, and he was wide open. He made like 5 or 6 in a row at one point, and Chicago State would not put a hand up. It was embarrassing.
How about that? Well, Mizzou shot 51% from 3, made 16 of 31. So that'll work.
Did he make 8?
Well, he had 24 points, so I assume he made 8 threes.
So of those 31 3-pointers, I'm pretty sure about 30 of them were wide open. So I might have made about 10, I think, most likely.
Wow. And they forced 24 turnovers. So give kudos to the Missouri defense.
Well, guys, I have a surprise for you before we get into our NFL chat. So since a lot of our viewers, listeners, etc., all over the world, I'm sure, because my family from Bulgaria will be listening to this weekly, I wanted to play a little clip that I thought encompassed our radio show. Can you guys guess which clip I'm going to play?
Peyton Manning's butler.
Wow. Well, as usual, Drew Brackett knows everything I will say. So here goes.
Well, can't hear anything.
You can't hear it?
Nope.
No.
Edit it in GarageBand.
All right.
Cut this out.
There goes the idea. I was going off my website, and I probably should have set up the clip, but basically Tom and I are arguing about Peyton Manning. This is back in 2013, again, when we had our college radio show, and Tim Tebow and Kyle Orton were the Broncos quarterbacks at the time. They're coming off an 8-8 season, and Tom Castleman seemed to think the Chiefs, who won maybe 2 or 3 games that year, would win the division. Mm-hmm. I went with Peyton Manning winning at least 10 games because, as Tom himself said, he might be the greatest quarterback of all time.
One of them.
So it was just a little fun argument. We will have to play that one out another time.
To clarify my position on that, years later, I can't believe we're still relitigating this, but that was when Peyton Manning was coming off of, I think it was 4 fusion surgeries to his neck area. Hadn't thrown a football in forever. I simply thought that he didn't have it at the time, and ultimately had a short window in Denver, but certainly was a lot more successful than I'd imagined, especially coming off of, I can't even imagine how difficult that could have been for him to recover from all of that.
If you were able to listen to this segment, I clearly referenced the preseason, which normally may not mean much, but if we're referencing arm strength and abilities of a guy coming off multiple surgeries, I would say I had some evidence to back up my point. Not to mention that I don't feel that the Broncos would have, they would take somewhat of a risk, but I don't think they would have signed him if they hadn't worked him out,
Fair enough,
the Colts let him go, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, they screwed
just
up.
Let him go.
And as far as, I don't know if you remember this, and I now can accurately say I was correct under unfortunate circumstances, but do you remember what I said about that deal, Drew?
No chance. You probably said it was awful for the Colts to let go of Peyton Manning, because back then you were a Colts fan.
I was a Peyton Manning fan. What I said, the Colts will never, ever win a Super Bowl with Andrew Luck as their starting quarterback, because as great as Andrew Luck was, he was not Peyton Manning, and they were going to downgrade. And Andrew Luck actually ended up being pretty good until he retired, but he was still an unknown. You had someone who was one of the all-time great players in the history of the league and was literally your whole franchise, and you just let him go. So I put a curse on the Colts saying they'll never win with Andrew Luck as their starter.
Well, he also didn't have an offensive line throughout his career there.
That's
and you
fair.
have Frank Gore, who's 55 running the ball back there. I mean,
Reggie Wayne,
he had
Dallas
T.Y.
Clark,
Hilton.
Marvin Harrison, Edgerrin James will do wonders for your offensive numbers and your ability to put up points.
Right?
Absolutely. But Reggie Wayne was there with Andrew Luck, and they had a few other players. My point is, Andrew Luck is not Peyton Manning. You don't let
Not
go of
in his
Peyton
prime.
Manning. He's the Colts. He was the Colts. They let him go. I said he would win a Super Bowl in Denver, and he did.
Mm-hmm.
So, anywho, let's go to 2020. This is the year we're in right now. That literally seems about 20 years ago with everything that's happened this year.
Yes.
But speaking to that, with the whole COVID stuff, we do have an NFL season this year. Did you guys think we would have it? I mean, some things are getting a little mixed around finally, but more or less things look okay right now.
I mean, the NFL had the most time to prepare for this. They're also it's the most liked sport in the U.S., most watched sport in the U.S. So they have heavy financial incentive. They had a lot of time. So they better be having a season or else they're doing something wrong.
Yeah, the financial numbers to the tune of $8 billion, I think it is, in overall revenue. To be perfectly honest, I didn't think there was going to be an NFL season, especially when we started getting to training camp and the NFL hadn't put out very many directives in terms of how to handle COVID, what protocols would be. I think that what they did was they adjusted the draft, which was a massive success. I absolutely thought that was a fantastic way that they handled that. But then they kind of sat on their hands and just waited for COVID to go away because, some people thought COVID might just go away, which it clearly didn't. So I
can think
that
of
they
one,
were.
But I won't get into that right now.
That's not that type of show. I'll only tangentially refer to it. But that's definitely something I thought was going to be a big stumbling block, was they had so much time. And we'll talk about this later with college football as well. They had so much time and they did so little with it. I didn't think they were going to pull it off. It still remains to be seen if they'll be able to pull off a full season. I think they'll be able to say with some degree of completion, like, yes, we've had a 2020 season. I don't know if everybody plays 16 games. We've already seen however many schedule changes. It's going to be tough to finish up if people don't get their act together on these respective teams and follow protocols a lot more closely.
Right. I kind of agree with something both of you said, and also sort of disagree with something Drew said, although I guess he didn't really say it that way, but it's kind of what you were saying, Tom. I almost feel like the NFL, in a way, has been fortunate. I followed it pretty closely, and they really didn't do very much to prepare for the COVID, and the players were actually upset like a week before the meeting in camp, and they're like, we have no directive. We don't know anything about testing. Now, I do understand that they've stepped up their testing protocol and everything, so they're getting better as it goes along. And we'll talk more about this later too, but the NBA is who's really handled it really well. The NHL, as well as the WNBA, can't forget them, putting the players in the bubble. Now, a bubble is not really plausible in the NFL as much, but I feel like they could have done certain things better. But we'll get right into, we're going to talk about some of these early season starts, what they mean. Do they mean much? Because it is weird. They didn't have the preseason, and they kind of had sort of abbreviated camps and stuff. They didn't have the full that they would have had, like the off season especially. They did stuff in the summer, but these guys are meeting in the off season. They weren't allowed to meet. So they kind of just got thrown right into the season. So I was just going to do a little contender-pretender segment, and I'll actually start with the game tonight. So if people are listening to this later, the Bills and the Titans play tonight at 6 o'clock.
Tuesday night football.
Tuesday night football. It's only the second game ever, I believe, that they played on Tuesday. It was like a Vikings-Eagles game, had been snowed out a few years back or something. I don't have it off the top of my head. I saw it something on the internet. But anywho, the Titans and Bills, the Titans are the one team that's been the most affected by COVID. They've shut down their facilities multiple times throughout the last week and a half. Kind of a miracle that this game is happening.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a matchup of two undefeated teams, the 3-0 Titans and the 4-0 Bills. Two teams that I guess to an extent maybe over exceeding expectations a little bit, maybe not. Again, it's early, but do you buy that these two teams are the real deal? Undefeated, both of them right now.
It's a tough one. I think the Bills are more real than the Titans are, in part because I'm biased on quarterbacks. I don't understand how Ryan Tannehill is doing as well as he is doing on that Titans offense, especially one where
only one interception.
Like I guess it's just that he's taking care of the ball and they're just playing well enough to win games. Good for them. I don't think that they're necessarily a full-on contender as far as a Super Bowl goes. They had a surprising run last year, which I don't think anybody saw coming.
Right, they were in the AFC Championship game. That would be the counter. They beat the Patriots, actually. The last pass Tom Brady threw as a Patriot went for a pick six against the Titans. So
something that I'm sure you take no pleasure in at all.
They've been no pleasure. They've been receiving hate like this from Tom since last year. I mean, these guys were one of the 4 final teams in the NFL last year. Now, do I think they're a top 4 team in the NFL? Probably not. But do I think they're a contender? I think you could put them as a contender.
No, I totally disagree with you. I'm going to interrupt you because, first of all, the Titans, they are at home. It's only about, they're only 3-point underdogs. I understand that because they're at home. But you look at the Titans, they don't have Adam Humphries, Corey Davis. They're both hurt. A.J. Brown, will he play? So Ryan Tannehill has got to find somebody to throw to. He has that tight end.
Though. You know what he can do that's very simple?
He also can hand it off to Derrick Henry.
He can hand it off to Derrick Henry and let the big man feast.
Yes, but you look at this Bills defense. I trust the Bills defense to try and contain Derrick Henry, hold him to 100 yards. But as I was saying, the Titans they've won all their games have been close. They've won them. Good for them. The Bills, they've also had close games. They've won them close. They've won them. But they beat the Rams by 3, the Raiders by 7. The Raiders just beat the Chiefs. So I have more faith in the Bills tonight to win this game. It will be a good one, though.
I think tonight the Bills will win the game, but they will not cover the 3.5. Expect the Bills to win by 2 to 3 points. I would like to say that I think the Bills are the real deal. If I had to pick between these two, more likely to make the Super Bowl. First off, I'd pick neither because the Chiefs are going to repeat, but we'll get to that later. But between the two, I would say the Bills are more likely because of Josh Allen. We all know he's got a cannon of an arm. We all know he can run. But this year, he is taking his passing accuracy to another level. He's completing 71% of his passes this year. He has 12 touchdowns and 1 interception, looking at the notes here. So he is doing a bit of everything. And I think you look at the Chiefs, I mean, they're the top dog in the AFC. But right now, if we're looking at the AFC, the Bills are probably the second best team in the AFC. They've played that well right now.
I think debatable, Lamar Jackson and the Ravens would have something to say about second best team.
Well, here's the problem with Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. Lamar Jackson is a fantastic running quarterback. However, Lamar Jackson has never come back from double digits. If you're able to shut down Lamar Jackson's running game, you will beat the Ravens. The Bills can run the ball and they can pass the ball. In the modern NFL, you got to be able to pass the ball. And the Ravens are not able to pass the ball. That might work in the regular season. But once we get to the postseason, we've seen the Ravens have been exposed. So until they actually win some playoff games under Lamar Jackson, I've got them as overrated.
Hang on, I'm gonna check you a little bit on the whole Baltimore Ravens, overexposed. I'm looking up right now. I'm trying to figure out what their record has been over the past couple of years with Lamar Jackson at quarterback, because I'm pretty sure outside of Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, it's single-digit losses. This is a fantastic team that runs and passes the ball well.
At the playoffs, though. Can you look that up as well while you're at it? I believe it's like 0-3, 0-4. Maybe he got 1. I think it's 0-3.
Last year they had the bye, and then they lost
to the Titans.
They did lose to the Titans game, yeah.
They got
I don't know.
smoked.
I think that you can't necessarily say that they're an overrated team if they went 14-2 last year, and the only team that they've consistently lost to has been the Chiefs.
Bucks. They're a regular season team. They have Giannis and Lamar Jackson are very similar. They're absolutely fantastic players, but they have glaring weaknesses. And when you go up in the playoffs against a great coach and a great team, those weaknesses can get exposed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will say part of Lamar Jackson's problem isn't necessarily just that he's not a great passer. They don't have great guys for him to pass to either. So it's their passing attack in general is pretty weak. Now, what Lamar Jackson does great is he takes care of the ball, which I can respect that. He's a low turnover guy, but get me to a playoff game, get yourself down double-digit points, which the Chiefs were down 3 times last year. All 3 playoff games, they were down double digits, came back and won all of them because they had Patrick Mahomes. Lamar Jackson has yet to win a game that he's trailed by double digits in the NFL. Yet to happen. So the Ravens is they're 0-3 against the Chiefs. So until they're going to have to play them at some point in the playoffs, until we see that they can actually do something against the Chiefs, they're in big trouble.
Well, sure, but you look at this year, you look at Mark Andrews, he's been such a target for Lamar Jackson, and Hollywood Brown, I mean, come on, his name is epic. He's also had his round of catches this year, so I think the
rated in passing offense? Can you look it up? I'm going to look it up right now.
What are they rated in passing offense? I mean, I'm not looking at their ratings in passing offense. Everybody knows the strength of this team is running the football, but they do have some targets out there.
Which is another reason for concern. Lamar Jackson is not running the ball at the level that he ran it last year. So I'm kind of...
I mean, he's averaging 5.8 yards per carry. That's not child.
How many yards does he have, though?
I mean, he has 238 through what?
Exactly.
5 games.
Through that's 5 not games. Great. That's significantly less than he did last year.
And maybe
so are people figuring him out a little bit? Because I think to an extent they are.
Yeah, I mean, of course you're gonna figure out a guy who's, this is his third year in the league. So yeah, you're gonna watch tape and develop more tape on him and figure him out. But I still think the Ravens are a top 2 team in the AFC.
Top 2 regular season team.
What else are we measuring by?
Well, we're measuring by contenders.
I think top 2 is a contender for sure.
They're absolutely a contender.
I look at the Bills as a more likely team to go deep in the playoffs, Bills or Ravens. I go with the Bills. I go with the Steelers because they have guys who can pass the ball. Speaking of teams to look out for this year, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Ben Roethlisberger is back, and that defense is incredible. Mm-hmm. You know what Roethlisberger said? He wanted to come back so he can play with that defense. He didn't even say the offense. Defense is incredible.
What are you talking about? They're giving up 21 points per game. That's 27th in the NFL.
No. You're looking at it wrong. They're 6th or 7th in the NFL in points allowed. The modern day NFL is all about points.
They've given up 16, 21, 21, and 29 points. That is not a stout defense, if you ask me.
I will pull up the stats so I can give you the exact numbers here.
I mean, Big Ben is having a really good season coming off the injury. The emergence of Chase Claypool we saw on the weekend on Sunday. The offense is good, but this defense is giving up a lot of points.
They're not. They're giving up 21.8 points per game right now, which is the 6th best in the NFL.
Okay.
That's pretty good.
Well, I just see they gave up
teams ahead of them.
The Broncos, the Texans, the Eagles, they're all not good teams.
The Bears, who are not that good on offense. The Cardinals, who still need to take a next step. The Colts, Phillip Rivers is washed up. The Ravens, of course, speaking of them winning, they win because of their defense. And the Rams. So all of those guys, I would take Ben Roethlisberger over any of those guys in the playoffs. So the Steelers, to me, the Steelers and the Bills are 2 teams to look out for in the AFC playoffs.
Well,
Now,
I would like to see the Steelers beat the Browns, who they play next Sunday, and then
who's
they
going to win
play
that
at the
game?
Ravens in a couple weeks. I want to see it happen. I want to see it happen
Who's going to
because
win
they haven't
the
played
Steelers
anybody.
Browns game? How often have the Browns beaten the Steelers over the years?
Oh,
Not very often.
Of course, but I'm just saying this is a good test because the Browns are hot. The Steelers haven't played anybody. They played the Giants, the Broncos, the Texans, the Eagles. So they need to play somebody. Here you go. This is a great matchup. Browns Steelers. Let's go. I'm ready.
You brought it up. The next team that I was going to say is not the real deal of teams that are really high up there in records. The Browns, 4-1. They just had Nick Chubb go down. Now Kareem Hunt is stepping up. He's a pretty good player. Their running game is good. Their defense, not that good. Baker Mayfield, still a turnover machine. And if we're talking about teams who have beaten easy teams, that's exactly what the Browns have done. They feasted on easy competition. So Steelers are going to beat the Browns this weekend, and you're going to eat your words.
Oh, I'm not saying they're not going to win. I think they're going to win. But, I just need them to prove to me that, hey, we're a legit contender in the AFC.
So a Ben Roethlisberger-led team with a good defense to you is not a contender in the AFC.
They are, but not. I want them to prove it to me come Sunday and beat down the Browns.
I don't know about beat down, but they will beat the Browns. That I can guarantee. You can take it to the bank.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens come Sunday. I won't guarantee that in any way, shape, or form.
Well, let me ask you about a couple other teams. What do you think about? Let's see. What do you think about the Seahawks? They're 5-0.
Yeah. Let's definitely talk the NFC. I think the Seahawks are contenders, and right now they're probably the best team in the NFC and possibly the National Football League. You look at Russell Wilson just playing out of his mind right now. The defense is giving up points, but they are winning close games, and they've played some good teams. They played the Patriots. They played Cowboys who have talent, but they have
the worst
at
defense
Arizona.
In the NFL, the Cowboys.
They have at Arizona their next game, not this weekend, but next weekend. That should be a heck of a contest out there in Phoenix.
And that'll go a long way to determining two contender-pretender things, because the Cardinals are also playing pretty well. Kyler Murray is having a season, I would say it's akin to what Lamar Jackson did last year.
Kyler Murray is better than Lamar Jackson, though, because he can pass the ball better.
Well, but I'm saying, they're having a similar arc in terms of their rookie year. They showed some flash. It was year 2 where they showed some real consistency. So it'll be really interesting to see. I think that one's going to be a shootout because neither the Cardinals nor the Seahawks are known for stout defenses this year. It'll be really exciting to see two great quarterbacks. Also, older veteran quarterback in Russ Wilson, who I think is 30, 31, something like that. And then Kyler Murray with some fantastic weapons for the Cardinals as well.
They're both shorter quarterbacks who run. And it's interesting because Russell Wilson kind of came in as a dual threat, and now he's developed into pretty much strictly a passer. He runs when he needs to, but he's not really a running quarterback anymore per se. I will say this about the Seahawks. First off, Russell Wilson is the man right now. And we'll do MVP predictions in a little bit, which I'm going to have major surprises for you there, by the way, because I think you guys know whose train I'm on, but I'm going to surprise you. But Russell Wilson right now has been playing out of his mind, but he is almost single-handedly carrying the Seahawks along with Metcalf and the rest of his receivers who are very talented. Do you guys care to guess where the Seahawks rank in yards per game allowed? Because actually their defense, as bad as it is, has bent and not broken completely. But in yards allowed, guess where the Seahawks are ranked in the NFL?
I mean, I'd just have to say they're in the bottom 20 would be my guess.
Drew?
I have no idea. I wouldn't say bottom 20. Well, I would say the 10 worst. Yeah, I could agree with that.
They are the worst in the National Football League in terms of yards allowed. Now, we know the Cowboys are the worst in terms of points, but in terms of yards allowed, the Seahawks are the worst. And I will surprise you a little bit, maybe not surprise, but you guys know I'm from Chicago and I'm a Bears fan. But the team to beat in the NFC is hands down the Green Bay Packers, because the Green Bay Packers have a better defense than the Seahawks, and they have a much better running back. Aaron Jones is a beast. He runs, he catches the ball. Aaron Rodgers has a better team around him than Russell Wilson. I could argue maybe Wilson at this point might be a little bit better, but they're both excellent quarterbacks, and Aaron Rodgers has better running game and he has a much better defense around him. So I think the team to beat in the NFC is actually the Green Bay Packers, who are sitting pretty at 4-0, and that offense has been rejuvenated because last year they were 13-3 behind their defense. This year they're scoring over 40 points a game regularly. So to me, the team to beat is in fact the Green Bay Packers.
I think that's a pretty fair statement to make, especially when you consider that they've been putting up all those points with who at receiver? I mean, Devontae Adams has been out for a couple of weeks. I mean, you have Alan Lazard, Valdez Scantling, I'm blanking on his first name. And how about Robert Tonyan coming out of nowhere as the tight end? Had like a big 3-touchdown game 2 weeks ago. The fact that they're able to do it with practically nobody, I mean, it's amazing what Rodgers has done with his career, having thrown 2 touchdown passes to a first-round pick, and that would be Mercedes Lewis, who was drafted like a decade ago by the Jaguars. Yeah, so it's what he's able to do with less is incredible.
Yeah, they haven't drafted a first-rounder for him in years, and they went and got a quarterback instead this year. How about that? Maybe he's got a little something to prove. And Aaron Rodgers has been amazing the last few years, but last year compared to years past, you could argue he was slightly less incredible than usual. They draft a quarterback, and he says, guess what? I'm still the man in the NFL. And
I think it's also year 2 in Matt LaFleur's system, though. Like, it takes a little bit of time to get used to an offense. So I think it's more that than, like, if he can't show up with the motivation to perform well just because he's the starting quarterback of the Green Bay Packers. Like, if he needs a rookie to, like, push him, I think that's selling his competitiveness short a little bit.
I agree, but at the same time, though, certainly year 2 does help. But I think it gives you just that little extra chip on your shoulder, just a little bit. But I think Aaron Jones, is very, very good for Aaron Rodgers, and he's someone who you don't think as a traditional pass catcher, but his running makes it easier for the other guys, and he can catch the ball. So it just makes everything easier when you've got an absolute star, because he's got the most touchdowns in the NFL the last 2 years.
Yeah, I thought there's going to be some regression to the mean for Aaron Jones, because he's had, 16 touchdowns, give or take, last year. Definitely thought that there was some opportunity for some of those carries or some of those goal line situations to go to other players. So the fact that he's been able to still score at this rate is a testament to his talent.
I got
obviously here you have to praise Aaron Rodgers as you guys have been, but don't forget about Aaron Jones. I mean, this guy's second on the team. Oh, I know, but it took you a while to bring him up. It's like, this guy is fantastic. Oh, you're bringing up Alan Lazard and knucklehead tight end Tonyan, whatever his name is. I mean, geez, bring up Aaron Jones, the guy has really been leading this team behind Aaron Rodgers.
I got a couple of teams real quickly, and then I don't know if you guys want to do, since this is our first show we're doing literally in 7.5 years, we were going to predict who we think is going to win it all this year, and obviously we've got a little bit of a look. Do you want to do that first or the MVP? And I have one thing before we do that.
Let's finish up with team, and then we'll go individual players. How's that sound?
That sounds good. So I'm going to ask you about 2 more teams, kind of a little more condensed chat on these 2 teams that have started off. One has started off really well, the Bears. The other, just the team in general, what we think about them. So the Bears are 4-1. Are the Bears the real deal? No. No, I think we'll agree.
No, I mean,
they've come back 3 times from down double digits. The Bears, not known for their offense, have made 3 double-digit comebacks.
They're still not.
Granted, against, not the best competition. They've played two good teams, the Colts and the Bucks, and the Bucks were injured and they lost against the Colts. They beat the Lions, the Falcons, who can't win a game. And who else did they beat? They beat someone else bad.
Giants.
The Giants, who are the worst. Well, I don't know who's the worst. The Giants or the Jets are the worst. Hard to say.
Ooh,
Probably the Giants.
They're all bad.
So the Bears are not the real deal. They've been a little fortunate doing all these close games.
Well, hey, they have they are at the Rams and then home against the Saints in a few weeks. Those will be two important games for the Bears.
Yeah, did you see the game last night? I stayed up watching it. I know, Drew, you went to bed, but my goodness, did the Chargers throw away another game or what? That was insane. They missed an extra point. They missed a field goal as time expired. They're up 20-3 in this game, and the Saints win it in overtime. It was pretty crazy.
But you got to love Justin Herbert, the rookie out of Oregon. My goodness, he is good. He has an arm. And it just seems like every time he drops back, somebody's open deep downfield, and he connects with them almost every time. So I don't know if you blame the Saints defense there or if the receivers are just getting open, and he's just putting it right in their hands.
He's playing like, and I will emphasize the mini part here. Emphasize the mini. But he kind of reminds me a little bit of Mr. Mahomes. He's playing like a mini Mahomes, running around, throwing the ball down the field. Been very impressed with him. Two other teams, though, then. So since we brought him up, the Saints are 3-2, barely. Should be 2-3. Drew Brees had like one pass, like worth 20 yards or more yesterday. Are the Saints and Drew Brees a little bit washed up, or, getting Michael Thomas back if he's not starting fights? Is that going to help him? Or, what's going on in New Orleans right now?
I mean, when you have Alvin Kamara at running back, who can play running back and wide receiver and basically do anything without being touched, you have a shot. Drew Brees can just dump pass to Kamara all game. And
that's what he did last night.
Well, yeah, and they'll win games. So Brees can't throw downfield. I think we all kind of know and accept that, but I think he knows and accepts that as well.
I think when it comes to playoff time, like you said earlier, teams will be able to scheme a lot more specifically to your weaknesses. I think the Saints will be fine in the regular season. I mean, we have 7 teams making the playoffs as opposed to 6 in previous years. So I think they'll definitely get in. And once you're in the playoffs, I mean, anything can happen. Anybody can pull a hammy or get a pass interference call or a pass interference non-call that can change the fate of the season.
And have to sit.
Absolutely. So
just ask the Patriots and Cam Newton.
If we're pretending that this is, a normal year, like I suppose like the Saints can't be knocked off as a contender. They can't be knocked off that list until they actually play poorly enough to deserve that. But it certainly seems like I think they're going to be coming up short of those expectations this year.
The Saints, for as talented of a roster as they have, in recent years, they've had limited playoff success. I mean, a couple of years ago, we saw them really not have luck against the Rams, but the year before that, they lost to the Vikings. Last year, they lost early again, I think, to the Vikings also. So they haven't really done very much with that roster in the playoffs. And maybe it is part of that. I mean, minus the Rams year where they probably should have made the Super Bowl, but I think they
definitely should have
2 first-round exits in the last 3 years, I believe.
Well, I mean, like 2 years ago with the Rams, that was a blatant pass interference call that the referees just decided to not call. I mean, the Rams player himself said after the game, I was trying to get pass interference to prevent the touchdown. You live to play another down, and they got away with it. And then the year before, you earn everything that you get. But they were one Minnesota Miracle away from winning that game against the Vikings.
He was on my fantasy team that year. He was very good for me.
Yeah, so I think, like, yes, they've come up short in the playoffs, but I don't think they've come up so egregiously short that it's fair to say that, recent success hasn't been there for them. I think they're 2 crucial plays away. One was just like a bad defensive meltdown, and then, of course, a missed call a couple of years back.
That's fair. How about the Bucks and Tom Brady? What do we think about the Bucks? No, not feeling the Bucks.
I think no. their front seven on defense is really, really good. Secondary is pretty young, needs some time to come together. And then I don't know what to make of like their running game. Like they seem to do okay. I just don't know if it's going to be, long-term success for the Buccaneers come January, February.
I think the signing of Leonard Fournette was a good signing. I'm not a big Ronald Jones guy. So I we'll see what happens with that run game, but you do have to give Brady some time to adjust to this offense, as it's a new offense for him. And I know Mike Evans, it just seems like he only catches 1-yard passes, but he's still a factor, and they've been dealing with injuries. OJ Howard, Chris Godwin, they've been injured, and so they've been having to rely on Scotty Miller.
Yep.
Which is something
who's been a big disappointment for the Bucs, and granted, again, he hasn't played in a while, and we've got this whole COVID season, and maybe he'll step up, but I've been very underwhelmed by Gronkowski. He was supposed to be a great fit with Brady. He's doing next to nothing so far.
Yeah, he's throwing blocks. He's throwing good blocks out there. He's not catching the ball.
Does he have a touchdown catch yet? I'm not sure that he does.
No, he doesn't, but
he's on my fantasy team, and he's done absolutely nothing for me.
Well, that was just a bad pick on your part. I mean, you look at Gronk, the guy retired, he partied it up. He's still probably partying it up, and he's just not going to have the same touchdown factor as he had in the past. He's a big guy and is probably still very fast, so I would utilize him as a blocker rather more than a pass catcher.
I think that's something that can't be discounted in the Rob Gronkowski discussion, was that he retired because he was in so much pain from all the injuries that he suffered. And then he came back on relatively short notice to be, a Tampa Bay Buccaneer once Brady went from New England to Tampa. And I don't think it can be discounted how difficult it is to put on that weight to get back up to an NFL playing weight and to be able to do it with athleticism, with just being used to carrying that around as he's running. So I think he's still kind of working through that.
That's fair.
I just think that he doesn't have, between injuries, age, and taking a year off, we're not going to see the Rob Gronkowski that we saw in New England. Yeah, no, I think that's done. I think we're looking kind of like an Antonio Gates type of situation where it's like within 20 yards to the goal line, he can be a weapon. Over the middle of the field, he'll catch a pass, but I think for him to be a difference maker, I think that's way too much to ask of him right now.
Okay, that's fair. I'm thinking off the top of my head, again, different situations, younger ages, but I think we saw Adrian Peterson come back from a major injury and dominate, 6 years ago, Peyton Manning. We saw Michael Jordan come back to the Bulls his first season. After that, he won the ring. So maybe Gronk isn't quite in that category, but
that's a rare area you're talking about. You're talking about all-time greats.
Yeah, but I think you look at Gronkowski, you can make a case for him being the most talented tight end ever, except for maybe now I think Travis Kelce is even better than him, to be honest. But I think if we're talking about the all-time great tight ends in the National Football League, he's certainly up there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
sure.
you could then there's the argument where you could say, well, Gronk is 6'6", 265. He's fast and can catch. Just throw it up for the guy. Well, yeah, of course. Of course he's going to be good. It doesn't mean he's, the best tight end ever.
Well, that's why Kelce is better, because Travis Kelce is a better route runner.
Yeah.
So I think Travis Kelce is the best tight end in the history of the league. I think he's Tony Gonzalez, but better because he's more athletic. He's literally unguardable. Like I saw him in person.
Gronk is very, very athletic.
I covered the Chiefs-Texans game when the Chiefs came back from down 24-0, and literally they could not stop Travis Kelce. Anytime Mahomes threw to him, it was guaranteed completion. The only time I think he dropped one, and it was like, oh my God, what happened? Okay. Well, we've had our teams. What do we got? Super Bowl predictions. You want to do who comes out of the NFC first?
Yeah, I mean, just give me the Seahawks right now. Yeah, of course. Take the chalk. Give me the chalk.
Tom?
Seahawks defense worries me long term. see. I'm just like looking at the standings here. Maybe I should take somebody out of the NFC East. That seems like that could be a really interesting pick going to the Super Bowl. I think it comes down to probably the two best quarterbacks in the NFC right now, Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. We've already spent a good bit of time talking about them and those two teams. I think they're probably the best bets, or perhaps the safest bets to come out at the end of the season.
So which one is it? Give me one.
I'll go with the better story. I think I'll say the Seattle Seahawks.
So both of you are picking the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, and you're picking the Packers. We know.
I will be picking the Green Bay Packers. Drew always knows.
It's funny. We didn't even talk about this before. I just know who you're going to pick.
The simple fact that the Seahawks have no running game. They have
Chris Carson would like a word with you.
The last defense in the NFL in yards per game allowed. The Packers have a better defense, and they've got a better running back in Aaron Jones. They can do more. I feel that the Seahawks, to an extent, will be exposed in the playoffs. Actually, they were even exposed a little bit by the Vikings, Sunday Night Football. Mm-hmm. Wilson had under 200 yards passing up until that last drive. I think that when a good team plays them, I think they will be able to slow down the offense a little bit. I think when we look at Seattle, when they were in the Super Bowl, that's when they relied on a defense and a running game. Ironically, now they're an all-out passing team, and their defense and running game are terrible. So they've really shifted a lot. To me, I think it is the Green Bay Packers. I think last year, they were a game away from the Super Bowl last year. They were a very good team, and everyone kind of counted them out. And going into the preseason, a lot of people said, the Packers aren't going to be that good this year, blah, blah, blah. And here they are, 4-0. I think they're leading the league in scoring, or they were recently. And they've got a solid defense. They've got Aaron Rodgers and Aaron Jones. I've got the Packers making it all the way.
I will say I think the biggest deciding factor in both AFC and NFC is who gets the single first-round bye. Because if it's the Packers or the Seahawks, I think for the top two spots, I think whoever gets that is going to have a decided advantage because they get a week to rest up, and they have, as importantly, a week where they can't be eliminated. So I think that's something that'll be really important when we get down to that portion of the NFL season for sure.
Yeah, that's a big thing we haven't talked about this year. There's 7 playoff teams, and there's only one bye. So that's a huge deal. I will say this, though, on the flip side to that, and we don't know how things will change. Things may change by the time the playoffs happen. But as of right now, in these NFL stadiums, we have no fans or limited fans. So does home field matter as much? I would say home field matters a little bit less than usual.
Yeah, it's less than usual, Common, but we're still seeing false starts and things of that nature. And, quite frankly, if you're an NFL player, you have to get on a plane. You have to get out of your comfort zone a little bit, disrupting your routine that you're used to every day and traveling to a different state, different place to play football. So that's part of it too. But I think that's the biggest part of it. If there were fans, there would be a significant home field advantage. But I still think there is a bit of it home field advantage. Not as much as recently, though, as past years.
I think to an extent that's accurate, but I think I agree with the travel, but I do think NFL players on average are less affected by that. Say an MLB or an NBA guy who are doing it every few days and they're playing multiple games. I think these NFL guys are making one flight. They're not making as many flights. So I do think the home field doesn't matter as much. I think it goes without saying you would prefer to take the bye. I do agree with what Tom is saying, but I'm saying in theory, maybe that doesn't matter as much as it normally would. And again, I think a lot of times if you're the great team, you can go out there and get it done. The Chiefs last year actually played better on the road than at home, ironically, and they just lost at home. So there it goes. Of course, they had to play at home in the playoffs because The Dolphins helped them out the last week against the Patriots. But last year, Kansas City, people know Arrowhead as, the Mecca, great. And I've been there. I've covered a few games. Arrowhead is special. But some athletes can kind of perform in different situations. And I think the truly great teams and truly great athletes, the home field doesn't hurt them as much, especially if they're going to have less fans. Now, why don't we go straight? We're talking about the Chiefs. Are they going to make it back to the Super Bowl in the AFC? And if not, who will make it?
I'm going to mute real quick.
Well, then I'll take over. Well, you mentioned the Chiefs. You mentioned the Chiefs in the AFC, and I agree. They're probably going to be the ones representing the AFC in the Super Bowl because they're the defending Super Bowl champs. Why not? Take the chalk. You mentioned the Steelers, and I know you don't like the Ravens postseason comment.
You are Mr. Criticized me for taking the chalk, and all of a sudden you're all about the chalk. Have you taken?
Oh yeah, just talking about it. Of course, I'm going to take the chalk.
Okay.
Of course. Doesn't mean I enjoy the chalk winning, but it doesn't mean I enjoy seeing it happen.
Oh, I enjoy watching the Chiefs.
Yeah, it makes sense. They're the defending champs.
Yeah, but how often do the defending champs make it back? That doesn't happen very often.
You're right. So it could be the Bills to dethrone them. Could be the Steelers. We'll see how Big Ben holds up. But maybe the Ravens. I know you don't like them in the postseason, but man, if they get going, you never know.
They're 0-3 against the Chiefs the last 2 years. They've yet to beat the Chiefs. And actually, quite frankly, so I actually covered that game last year. It ended up being a 5-point game, but Kansas City was in control the whole game. Baltimore scored a touchdown with less than 2 minutes to go, and then they were down whatever, they went for 2, didn't get it, but it was a double-digit game most of the way, so that score was not reflective of where the game was. Now, the first time they played, it was much closer. Mahomes produced magic. They won in overtime, but the last 2 times they played, last year in the regular season and then this year in the regular season, the Chiefs have essentially won by double digits both times. So the Ravens they're not close. They're so far behind. And some of it is matchups. Actually, the Chargers, for example, have played the Chiefs tough over the years. I mean, the Chiefs beat the Chargers by 3 this year. So a couple years ago, the Chargers beat the Chiefs at Arrowhead.
I mean, the Chiefs are the Ravens' kryptonite, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. For me, it's hard to consider the Ravens a Super Bowl contender because I just don't see how they can beat the Chiefs.
Well, that's assuming that they face the Chiefs. I mean, you're just talking about, how the Chargers have played them closely, how they lost to the Raiders this past week. Something that I texted to my brother-in-law the first night of the season, it was the Texans and Chiefs game. And the way that the Chiefs played, I said, are we looking right now at a team that can go 19-0? That is how good that they looked.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
They've had a couple moments, they've had a couple games this season where they look like they can be had. And especially if you look at, he's still an amazing quarterback, of course, but Patrick Mahomes has more issues when he's dealing with a good zone defense, with good zone coverage, because
they learned not to blitz him. The NFL finally learned not to blitz him.
Right.
When they blitz him, he demolishes them.
So I think you can still consider the Ravens a contender because, number one, they might not face the Chiefs. When it comes down to playoff matchups, if the Chiefs get had earlier, that might not even come to pass. And it'll be interesting to see if the Ravens coaching staff, being 3-0 against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, actually kind of devises a game plan. I flipped that around. If they actually devise a better game plan, because I think where Lamar Jackson struggles is when you make him purely a pocket passer. If they can commit to running the ball more and having that multifaceted running attack when they're down, I think the Ravens can be really, really dangerous if they just stick with that longer. That said, I'm going to side with Drew and probably you, Common, where I don't see a team in the AFC that I can definitely say knocks the Chiefs off. So as the reigning champions, I'm going to stick with them until proven otherwise.
The only team that can beat the Kansas City Chiefs is
the
the
Oakland
Kansas City
Raiders,
Chiefs.
or the Las Vegas Raiders.
No, it's as well as the Raiders played in that game, the Chiefs had 10 penalties for 94 yards. I don't know if you got a chance to watch that entire game, because I did. And in the first quarter of that game, Mahomes threw a 70-yard touchdown to Hill that was called back because of an offensive penalty. And I think the Chiefs are going to clean that up. I think they're going to clean up the penalties. As good as the zone defense was for the Raiders, a lot of it was the penalties. Penalties are drive stallers. They kill you. And I think as long as the Chiefs aren't committing penalties, they'll be fine. I think their defense, their secondary, yes, it was a little bit of a concern, but their defense has played so good this year. It was 3 or 4 big plays that made the difference for the Raiders. So I think they'll be able to clean that up to an extent as well, because their defense was a top 5 defense in the NFL prior to this last week in points allowed. And I still think they're like 8th in points allowed, even with this last week, 7th or 8th. So I think they're going to clean it up. I think Edwards-Helaire at running back is actually an improvement to what they had last year with Damian Williams. I think they've won in the playoffs. I think 2 years ago, the Chiefs were the best team in the NFL. They went up against the Patriots. They had yet to win in the playoffs. They've won 3 times with double-digit deficits in the playoffs. The Chiefs are simply the team I trust the most. They're the most talented team in the NFL. They have the greatest quarterback in the history of the league leading them, with a brilliant coach in Andy Reid, who knows how to call a game. I mean, these trick plays, these gadgets, they're something else. I think the Chiefs are not only going to make the Super Bowl, but they will repeat. And I will go ahead and say it right now on the air. Mark this down, October 13th, 3:38 p.m., that Patrick Mahomes will end up with 7 championship rings by the time he retires. Because you look at Kelsey, you look at Hill, you look at Hardman, you look at Robinson, you look at Helaire, all these guys are in their 20s. And Andy Reid himself has said he has no plans to retire. And why should he when he has that wealth of talent? The Chiefs are going to be a dynasty in this National Football League. Yes, in a one-game scenario, you can lose. Mm-hmm. But if I'm a betting man, I would not be betting against the Chiefs. You told me right now, take the Chiefs or the field. I'm taking the Chiefs.
So it sounds like we have common Super Bowl winning pick. Drew, between Seattle and Kansas City, who do you see coming out in that matchup?
Oh, give me Seattle. I mean, you have to go with the team that didn't win the previous year, right? I mean, you got to mix it up a little bit. And, I just want to also just go against common, because I would pick the field in that scenario.
Would you pick the field or the Chiefs, Tom?
I would pick, especially this year with all the uncertainty, I would take the field. Okay. Winning in the NFL is incredibly hard. So to say like one team is absolutely so much better than everybody else.
Let me flip it this way. Since you're talking about these unforeseen circumstances, which is possible.
Well,
we don't know what they are.
Well, okay, even just in terms of like a regular football season.
Okay, right now, if I told you Mahomes and company will stay healthy, I mean, there's going to be a small injury here, but relatively healthy with no injuries, would you take the Chiefs or the field?
I would still take the field, because even in like the context of like a normal season where injuries are going to be a part of it, I mean, you're still going to have off games. To say like that the Chiefs are so much better that they can't have a game where they have more penalties than they ought to, that they can't have a game where they might be slightly outcoached or just have some ball bounce a weird way where somebody tips it and it's an interception one way or the other. I think it's really hard to clearly say, especially at week 6, or technically we're still in week 5 because we got Tuesday Night Football. To say that the Chiefs are so much better that the entire field is an inappropriate pick. I think it's too early for that. We'll just have to wait and see.
I'll go in the middle there. I would say they're definitely better than the field by a decent amount. I don't know if I'd go as far as so much better. I mean, I'm not telling you to bet your life savings on the Chiefs over the field. It could go either way, but for argument's sake, I like the Chiefs. And one thing that you brought up was home field advantage. I think they already have the tiebreaker against the Ravens. They're going to play the Bills next week. They're going to beat the
That'll be a
Bills because
great
I think
game.
the Chiefs are not going to lose 2 games in a row. It's just not going to happen. So I think, obviously Patriots have a few more losses, but they've already beat the Patriots head to head. I think they're going to have, as good as much as I like Tennessee and Pittsburgh, especially considering that Pittsburgh and Baltimore are going to have to play each other twice this year. And then you have the Browns who are also doing good. I think the Chiefs are going to be the 1 seed. And if they're the 1 seed, good luck.
And they actually will have a home field advantage with fans in the stands. That's another big thing. Is different states are going to have different rules. Different municipalities will have different rules on who can be there. Seattle, Washington probably doesn't have fans at all this year. Green Bay, Wisconsin likely will have fans at some point. So that's another big reason to look at home field advantage and who has the higher seed going into that.
Kansas City does have fans, for the record.
And we saw that. We're going to transition. We saw that in the college game.
Wait, hold on. Before we transition.
Oh, it was a perfect transition, too.
It was.
MVP.
Oh,
we'll keep it short.
Russell.
Right, for me, MVP is going to be Russ Wilson. He has the clutch moments, the story, and the stats. He's going to be my MVP pick.
Okay. Drew?
Yeah, Russell Wilson. Go with the chalk.
Well, I'm surprisingly going to also go with Russell Wilson because.
It's not a surprise.
Well, I'm on the Mahomes train over here, though, because I think Mahomes is a better quarterback than Russell Wilson right now. I think if I were taking a 1-game scenario, I would take Mahomes. But I think simply the fact that Wilson, he has 19 touchdowns. Mahomes has 13 right now. Wilson's a little bit ahead of him. What Wilson has going for him is that he has a worse running game and a worse defense. He's going to have to put up the numbers for them to win. And the number one thing Wilson has going for him that Mahomes doesn't, in the event that it's a close race, Wilson has never won MVP. Mahomes has already won MVP.
Vote.
Yes, they're going to have to vote, and Mahomes is going to win MVPs for years to come. So if that competition is even remotely close, I think Russell Wilson's going to do it. In fact, I remember 2 years ago when Mahomes did win the MVP in what was the second season in the history of the league where he had 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns. For most of the season, Mahomes was not the favorite. It was actually Drew Brees. Everyone wanted Drew Brees to win MVP, but Mahomes outperformed him by such a high amount that he ended up being the MVP. I think this year Wilson is already kind of a little bit further ahead, that Mahomes and Wilson's stats won't be significantly different, hence to go with Wilson. Now, Drew, go ahead and transition.
Well, speaking of the crowds, over the weekend in College Station, a huge crowd on hand for the Florida Gators and the Texas A&M Aggies, and Dan Mullen was
upset.
He wants to pack the swamp for this weekend.
He wants 90,000 people. That's what he said. What do you think about that, Tom? What do you think about 90,000 people in the swamp?
In Gainesville!
I think it's grossly irresponsible. I don't know how far down this road we want to take this conversation, but nice sentiment, but this ain't the year for that sort of talk, I don't think.
That's fair. Well, I covered the Mizzou Florida
Tom, I
game.
want my team to win, though. I want the Gators to win. I mean, it was because A&M had the crowd. That's why they won the game, according to Dan Mullen.
Right.
I would argue that was partially accurate because I watched almost that entire game. I was watching Mizzou and Florida at the same time. And I think Florida did make some mistakes where you'd argue in a game like that, the crowd did make the difference. I will say Florida, single-handedly, my opinion of them changed because I'm so used to seeing Florida's great defenses. And I was ready to hop all aboard the Florida train because Kyle Trask is an amazing quarterback. He is one of the top 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in the college football. But I was so disappointed in that Florida defense. I mean, we saw it in the Ole Miss game where they got torn up, but they got torn up bad against A&M. Actually, the Florida A&M game was like 41-38, something like that. But the score was not indicative of how bad the defenses were because we had a lot of long drives. Neither defense could get off the field. And the Gators are so far away from being a real contender because they're so horrific at defense. In fact, I'll give you one lock this week for a bet that if you want to go home and bet your mortgage on or something, don't bet your mortgage. But
you're 0-1 so far, Common, on your locks.
I would guarantee you that the Florida Gators and LSU Tigers, which LSU lost to our Mizzou Tigers by 45-41, one of the games of the year. What's the over-under, Drew? You have it written down, I'm sure, on points, Florida and LSU.
The over-under in that game is now 72.
Okay, take the over. Take the over.
Yeah,
Those defenses are horrific. I'd probably bet over 80 in that game, to be honest.
Wow.
Take the over. LSU couldn't tackle anyone. Did you guys see the Mizzou game or see any highlights? They literally showed no desire to tackle.
Neither team could
letting
tackle
Mizzou
them.
run by them and not tackling them.
There were 10,000 combined yards in the game. I mean, there was no defense whatsoever.
1,
it was just run deep,
it
throw
like 10,000.
Yeah, and you know what? The irony of it all, they won on a defensive stop.
Yeah, Mizzou stopped them 4 times in a row from the 1-yard line.
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest win for Coach Drinkwitz. He could not have imagined the better opening week win. And actually, Barry Odom at Mizzou, can you guess how many top 25 wins he had in his 4 or 5 year stint at Mizzou? 1 top 25 win from Drew. Yeah. What do you think, Tom? It is correct. I'll just go ahead and say it.
I haven't followed Barry Odom that closely, but that makes sense.
Yeah.
And they probably, I don't know who, I was purely guessing.
They won at probably Florida with Drew Lock.
Yeah, I was going to say they probably stole a Florida or maybe South Carolina was 25th one week or something.
No, they beat Florida. Florida was just outside the top 10 maybe, and they beat them by 3 touchdowns on the road. It was kind of a statement win, actually.
Wow. Okay.
That's when at the time, because Odom was already getting talk about getting fired that year, and then he won that game. Mm-hmm. Lo and behold, he got fired the next year. So they should have let him go after the Kentucky game where they lost to Kentucky when Kentucky got the untimed down, and Mizzou didn't get a single first down in the second half despite having an NFL quarterback. Just pathetic. Great defensive coordinator, Barry Odom is. Great defensive coordinator. Not a head coach in the SEC, though.
Right.
And Eli Drinkwitz is the man for the job at Mizzou. I wouldn't get too excited about this year. Their defense still has major holes to fill, and I think their offense will not be this good when they play an actual defense, not LSU. But I would say for the future, Mizzou has their guy, and the quarterback's a freshman. So pretty cool. And what made this weird, the weirdest thing about the Mizzou game is that we have this COVID-19 season, and the game got moved. It had nothing to do with COVID-19. Mm-hmm. There was a hurricane in Louisiana. It was supposed to be a home game for LSU. It still got moved to Columbia, and it was actually considered a home game for LSU. The profits went to LSU, but it was a home game for Mizzou. And in a game like that, when it's that close, you get down to the 1-yard line, I'm willing to bet that made the slight difference to push Mizzou over the top.
It was also an 11 a.m.
1-yard difference. It made the 1-yard difference.
It was also an 11 a.m. local start. And, when you're a team like LSU, you're ranked, you're like, well, we're going to go to Mizzou and beat them. No problem here. They may have been, just kind of looking ahead and just kind of went through the motions in that game. Because it was an 11 a.m. game on the road.
Should Bo Pelini be fired? He's their defensive coordinator, the former Nebraska head coach. Bo Pelini's the DC over at LSU, and they gave up against Mississippi State, scored 2 points against Kentucky? How many points did they score against Kentucky, Drew?
They got 2 points.
I mean, that game was bananas, but 2 points.
But Mississippi State, their quarterback set the SEC record with 600 yards and 6 touchdowns at LSU. Then they go up against Mizzou with the freshman quarterback making his second career start. Mizzou had 3 of their top 5 wide receivers out for injury, including a starting offensive lineman, and you give up 45 points. I mean, come on. That's bad. And we've seen it twice, not once. That's 2 eggs the LSU defense showed. So, I mean, they're the defending national champs, but almost every starter is gone from last year's team, and they have some major work to do. Let me ask you this, though, while we're on the topic of SEC football. A big game this weekend. Number 2, Alabama against number 3, Georgia. Who you got, and by how much? The line is 6, by the way, for Alabama, of course.
Of course. I mean, I know who I want to have win.
Georgia.
I may as well just go with that. I think we will see for the first time in Nick Saban's tenure at Alabama a former assistant coach get a win against him. So far Nick Saban is 20-0 against his assistant coaches, which I actually don't think that says a whole lot because he's has
20-0 against a lot of people.
Yeah, he has an 87% winning percentage in his time at Alabama. If you take out the 20 wins that he has against his former assistants, he has an 85% winning percentage against everybody else. So that just goes to say he's a great coach who has a great team in a great area at a great program for recruiting. But give me the Bulldogs in this one. Why not?
All right. Well, we've got a heavyweight matchup at Bryant-Denny in Tuscaloosa. And Tom, you brought up Georgia. They had tough starts to games, but the defenses have really shown up in the second half for the Bulldogs, giving up just 12 points per game overall this season. Bama, on the other hand, giving up 30 points per game.
Miss. 48. Huh? Was it 48 that they gave up against Ole Miss, Alabama?
I was talking about Georgia.
No, I know, but you were talking about Georgia's defense during that transition.
Well, yeah, let me finish. Yeah, Bama's giving up 30 points per game on defense. But good luck to the Bulldogs stopping Najee Harris and Jalen Waddle, also Devonta Smith. The Tide offense, 51 points per game this season. That's first in the country. Georgia, though, 36 points per game. That's 23rd in the country. So it's a heavyweight battle. I think it's going to be a close one. It can go either way. Probably the Tide end up winning, though, because it's in Tuscaloosa.
Quick point. On that 51 points per game, Mizzou did hold Bama to just 38.
That's right. Yeah, Mizzou looks good, by the way. They lost to Alabama and Tennessee. Harris for Alabama is a difference maker at running back. 206 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns. I will say this, since Lane Kiffin is such a recent assistant to Nick Saban, perhaps he had a little bit of an idea into Alabama's defense, maybe. I'd like to think that that's possible why Ole Miss scored so much. Ole Miss, over the years, does play Alabama tough. They've beat them several times, and they've also played them close several times. So I would not read too much into that defensive performance by Alabama. Is it worrisome? Maybe a little bit, but I would argue that it's going to help Alabama long term. You give up 48 points and you still win. Nick Saban has a lot of work and a lot of things he can tell his guys to improve on. Mm-hmm. So I expect the Alabama defense to wake up. They've got a very balanced attack. They've got Harris, who's got 10 touchdowns already in 3 games. They've got a pretty good quarterback. Let me pull up the numbers here since I have them written down, Drew.
I mean, Mac Jones is your typical Alabama game manager, at least before Tua got there. Mm-hmm. He's not going to turn the ball over very much, and you just have to hand it off to Najee Harris or throw it up for Jalen Waddle and Devonta Smith. He has plenty of guys out there.
He's like number 2 in the nation or number 1. I just retweeted something in passer rating. I would say Jones has shown the ability to throw the deep ball. If you've watched Alabama football, I would say labeling him as a game manager is not fair. I think he's better than a game manager. Is Harris their star at running back? Yes. But I think they've got a dual threat attack, and that's one of the crazy things. We talked about how we started this radio show 7 years ago, or finished it 7 years ago. We started about 10 years ago. The transformation of the SEC is really something. Now, they still play good defense, but the level of defensive play has gone down, and the level of offensive play has increased dramatically. The SEC now all of a sudden tends to have a lot of really good quarterbacks, and Jones is pretty good. So when we see these shootouts in the SEC, we didn't used to see these. I mean, we have Mizzou 45-41 over LSU, Alabama 63-48 over Ole Miss. I mean, even like Arkansas, Auburn was like 30-28 or whatever, which Arkansas got screwed. I don't know if you guys saw that game. That was bad by the officials.
It was a bad call. Yeah, absolutely. But
So the
you're
SEC
talking about the offense, though. But Common, remember, this is COVID. Like, teams didn't tackle in camp very much.
No,
So
I know.
I think that makes a huge difference when you're not practicing tackling. And
That's
we've
what
seen
Ed
it in all
Orgeron
the
said
games.
that basically, and so did Dan Mullen said that as well.
And I could be a coach.
I will say to this point though, I think we've seen the last few years the points, having covered the SEC the last few years. There's a lot more scoring in the conference as a whole. I think this year it's jacked up even more for many of those things that you said, but I think the SEC has transformed a little bit. I would say it's definitely, we're seeing a lot more really good quarterbacks come to the SEC. It used to be run the ball and play defense. Now we've got, first round draft picks coming to the SEC. And it's cool to see because I love points. So I'm a fan of it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of talent. Absolutely. You mentioned the NFL caliber quarterbacks. Yeah, there's a lot of talent, which is great. But, I wouldn't go I wouldn't base it off of this year.
That's fair. But again, the points in general have been higher the last few years. Maybe not as much as now, yeah. But I think you take the SEC scoring last year compared to 2013, as Tom would say, I don't have the stats in front of me, but I can guarantee you that there was a lot more scoring. Speaking to that, though, the SEC is always a favorite to make the college football playoff. And, Alabama, Georgia every year, LSU last year obviously won the national championship. And what was arguably the greatest season in college history, you could argue. That's how dominant they were. Mm-hmm. How many teams make the college playoff out of the SEC, and what 4 teams make it? 1 through 4, rank them right now. Again, this is our first show. We're going to put you guys on the spot, but rank your college football teams. We haven't seen Ohio State play. We haven't seen any of the Big 10 and Big 12, so there's a lot of asterisks connected to this. But we're going to have fun, and we're going to go ahead and pick them.
Well, I think it is. Sorry, Tom. It is tough because you haven't seen Ohio State, Wisconsin, Penn State play. I would like to see those teams play before we dive into it. But since it was on the rundown, I'll dive into it for you. Clemson.
I didn't throw this out of nowhere.
No. Clemson will likely get the 1 seed. Maybe probably Bama, the 2 seed, maybe Ohio State or a Big 10 team, that 3 seed, maybe even Notre Dame.
And then not the 4 Dame.
And then the 4 seed, likely a Georgia or somebody out of the SEC of that. Well, I guess Georgia. It would be my 4.
Have you studied the schedule closely? Let me ask you, like me.
No, I have not.
Do you know who Notre Dame plays this year?
If I had to guess, they probably have to play Clemson.
Yes, correct. So take them off the Final Four pick. Take them off right now.
Yeah, but if those two, okay, here's the situation. What if Clemson runs the table? Notre Dame's only losses to Clemson. Alabama runs the table. Georgia's only losses to Alabama. Who gets in?
I think they're going to favor Georgia out of the SEC. And then we've got Ohio State, who's likely going to run the table in the Big 10. So what I have is I think Clemson has a very easy schedule. Their only top 25 teams they play are Notre Dame and then Virginia Tech, who's right at 23-24. So Clemson's really their only tough game they have to play is Notre Dame. And if that's the only game they have, I'm taking Trevor Lawrence, future NFL draft pick, who actually had a little bit of a down year last year with the turnovers. Guess what, guys? He's cleaned it up. No turnovers this year for Trevor Lawrence. He's throwing the ball all over the field. He's running the ball well. Clemson, Miami was ranked number 7 in the country, whatever that means, is the U back, and Clemson beat them 42-17, and they were on the goal line going in to make it 49-17. So a season where you play a lot of conference games, I just don't see them losing in that conference. They never lose in the conference. And they've got what? Like Trevor Lawrence has lost like 1 game the last 2 years, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was the national championship game.
Yeah. And his Clemson, relative to the last 4 years, Clemson, They've lost to like Alabama and they lost to like Ohio State. Like I don't know if they've lost to anyone else. So
And they also have a guy, Travis Etienne, who's just a fantastic running back.
It's a dynamic duo. They've
Trevor
got the
Lawrence.
quarterback and the running back. I think Clemson to me is kind of the one team I would consider a lock to make the playoff. And I mean, we've seen them make it so many years in a row. They're in the playoff every year. It's Clemson and Alabama. And here's my one thought I'll say about the college football season as a whole. Because you guys know I believe this more than anyone. College sports are so unpredictable, more unpredictable than pros by a big margin. But I think this year it's amplified even more with less preparation, without the home fields. You know, the conference only, which I absolutely love the conference only SEC schedule. It's created some really exciting games. I'd rather watch a close game between two teams who don't play each other that often as opposed to a cupcake game where Mizzou plays like McNeese State or something. So, but I'll say this. This is what my prediction is for every college football week. I'll take Alabama. I'll take Clemson. And I have no idea what else will happen. But that is what I think going into every college football week.
I mean, those are safe bets. So
yes, safe bets, but
I'd have to agree.
That's the point. Now, I do like Ohio State in the playoff as well, though. I think Ohio State has one of the only returning finalists for Heisman last year in Justin Fields. The Heisman finalist last year, he's the only one that's back. He, of course, was very vocal in getting the Big Ten back to play. You know, he was probably the most outspoken athlete about return to play. Because as we know, the Big Ten comes back, I think, the 24th of October. Is that right, Drew? I believe
Something
it's
like that.
I believe it's so in a couple weeks. You know, most people who are tuning in to our show an hour and 24 minutes in probably know that the Big Ten is coming back, but in case they don't, the Big Ten originally voted not to play this year, then chose to play, and Fields was one of the most outspoken guys in relation to that. I'm trying to pull up my stats here, Drew. Justin Fields, more than 3,000 pass yards, nearly 500 rush yards last year, a true dual threat player, a guy who wants to go up in the NFL draft boards, a guy that's returning. I mean, I think Ohio State will make it out of the Big Ten. The problem with them, though, I believe it's only 8 games for Ohio State. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. So they have literally almost no room for error. I think if they lose a game, they're likely out of the playoff picture. So they kind of got to go perfect. Do you think that's true?
I don't think so.
Look at it this way: Ohio State goes 7-1, and Georgia goes 9-1 with a close loss to Alabama. Are they going to argue 9-1 in a tougher SEC conference, losing to Alabama versus 7-1 Ohio State? I think they're going to take Georgia in that scenario.
I think that they'll go, well, it depends on who the other teams are, because I have Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, and Georgia as my 4 teams getting in regardless. I don't think it'll come down to that. I think if it comes down to, let's just say Notre Dame has one loss to Clemson or Ohio State, they'll pick Ohio State. I mean, I know how you said that.
Ohio State, really? Well, obviously it depends on who Ohio State loses, but Notre Dame's kind of a big name program as well.
Well, yeah,
I think if Notre Dame's only loss is to Clemson, I would think they're probably going to take Notre Dame over Ohio State, assuming they both have one loss, obviously. Because I've got the same Final Four as you, but I have Ohio State finishing 8-0. I have Alabama going 10-0. I have Clemson going, what are they playing, 10 games? I'm not even sure how many games they're playing. I have them going undefeated or whatever they play. And I have Georgia sneaking in as the 4 seed because Georgia's going to demolish Florida. And people who haven't watched Florida are going to think Florida is better than they are because they don't play defense. So I've got Alabama winning the championship, by the way, because if you've seen the college football seasons in the last 10 years, almost every year that Alabama goes in ranked number 2, they win. If they go in ranked number 1, they don't win. I think Clemson is going to cruise through that conference, and Clemson's going to go in as the number 1, and Alabama being number 2 or number 3 is going to help them a great deal. it's easier to, I mean, we had LSU as the number 1 last year, but usually it's easier to come in as the 2 or 3. And whoever's the 4 seed, though, this year will actually keep it competitive because we're used to seeing Oklahoma come out as the 4 in the Big 12 and get demolished. Well, this year, the Big 12 is not going to have any representatives. The Big 12 went 0-3 against the Sun Belt, which is symbolic of the season as a whole. Now, is that going to happen again? I don't think so. You guys know I used to cover Arkansas State at my first job. They beat Kansas State. That was a huge upset. Coastal Carolina beating Kansas, not as much. Kansas is terrible, obviously. But I thought, what was the other one? Iowa State lost to Louisiana Lafayette. That was a pretty big upset. The Raging Cajuns are still undefeated, though, so there's that.
Yeah.
But I think, the Big 12 is really, really down this year. I think the Pac-12, I don't think there's anyone real good out of the Pac-12. So this is a year where, it's going to be the SEC and the Big Ten and Clemson. That's kind of what we're looking at. And I know that's not very bold. That's kind of what we've had a lot. But I think we're missing Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma's obviously he's got 2 losses already. They're toast. Mm-hmm. So what do you have? Me and you have the same Final Four. Who do you have in the title game, Tom? Because I've got an Alabama-Clemson cliche pick with Bama rolling.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably I probably would go with Clemson on that simply because I'm going to trust Trevor Lawrence to be incredible. And Etienne, I don't know why he came back for another season. He could have gone to the NFL and just started making money, which I support wholeheartedly. So I had the same title game as you. I'm on the other side, though. I'm taking the Tigers.
Drew, what's your Final Four? You probably have someone random in there, like
didn't I already say it? I said it about 10 minutes ago when we first started this segment. Clemson, Bama, Ohio State, probably, and Georgia. Yeah.
So we all have the same boring Final Four.
Of course.
No,
so who would
like
be,
I like
who
how
would
you
be
said
a surprise team? I don't have this in the rundown. If not those, who would be someone?
I mean, define surprise. I think anybody outside of those 4 would be a surprise, whether it be Wisconsin, Penn State, Notre Dame, Oregon. If you really want to dig deep, Oklahoma State.
They barely beat Tulsa.
The only way that there's a surprise team that makes it into the Final Four is if one of these Final Four teams is a surprisingly bad team and is out. And really, the only team for which we can say that is even a possibility is OSU, because the other 3 teams have already been playing and have already pretty well established what they are. So basically it comes down to, is OSU going to meet its standard? And if not, then sure, we can have a quote-unquote surprise team get in. But for as unpredictable as college sports can be,
I'll give you one possibility, and I'm looking at the schedule right now.
Mm-hmm.
Traditional basketball powerhouse, home of the Michael Jordan. We'll have more on Jordan later in the show, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Preface that, the GOAT discussion. Statement of the week. Well, I know it's not on the rundown. Relax, Drew. North Carolina this year does not play Clemson. Now, they play Notre Dame, but they host Notre Dame. So, and North Carolina's undefeated right now. They also play at Miami, but otherwise, their schedule looks pretty good. And that's what it was. The Notre Dame's playing the ACC teams this year. Is that right, Drew?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So they're basically in that conference this year.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking UNC. You got to give love to Sam Howell. He'll be coming up in the Heisman talk here. But yeah, they're looking really good, and they could be a sneaky team if Clemson loses and North Carolina runs the table, beats Clemson in that ACC championship game. You never know.
Well, I would argue that if they run the table and lose in that game, they're still doing the ACC championship. They're planning on it.
To my knowledge, yeah.
I would argue that North Carolina could even lose in that scenario and still make it if they beat Notre Dame and beat Miami and lose close. I mean, I don't know. That's tough.
Only if OSU does poorly. Like, nobody gets in on their own merit outside of those 4 teams, because it's like you said, college sports is unpredictable, more unpredictable than pro sports. It is everywhere except for the top in college football. I mean, how many years have we had the same conversations about Bama, Clemson, OSU? those have been the mainstays for the most part for the college football playoffs, and then it rotates that fourth team, whether it's LSU or Oklahoma, something along those lines.
Georgia.
It's
the fourth
like,
team is often the second SEC team,
right?
which is usually Georgia, but was LSU last year.
Right. So I just don't think, like, yeah, this team can have, like, they can have a great season and they can, UNC can run the table, or perhaps Notre Dame, Notre Dame faces Clemson, so we'll stick with the UNC. Perhaps, yeah, they run the table and lose to Clemson. They still don't get in if Ohio State just takes care of business. I don't really see a way that they necessarily even overcome Georgia. The only way they overcome Georgia is if it comes down to the SEC championship game. Like, Georgia loses to Bama, but I don't know, even then, they're going to put in the teams that they want to put in for better ratings. Georgia's going to get more eyeballs than the Tar Heels will.
How about the Heisman? What do we got? Drew, you've got UNC over there. You giving some love to UNC?
Sam Howell, I mean, honestly, if they run the table and, he keeps doing what he's been doing, maybe. But you have guys like Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence, the two Heisman favorites this season. You got to believe that one of those guys will win it.
Do you think having Etienne and Lawrence, does that take away one from the other at all, or not really? Do they take away numbers or votes away?
I don't think so. I think people pretty clearly see Trevor Lawrence as being the reason that Clemson is great. Not to take anything away from
Etienne puts up some huge numbers, right?
Well, that's my
I mean, if
question.
that guy goes off on the ground, give him the Heisman.
Well, for sure, but if it's, Trevor Lawrence has amazing numbers, Etienne has amazing numbers, I think more people just naturally go quarterback because that's the way the game has shifted. It used to be, the Barry Sanders, the O.J. Simpsons, you have a great running back, that's your Heisman. It shifted to quarterback, I think. So I think
I agree.
in an equal
situation,
with Tom,
but the mere point that Drew is countering that, though, that would be the counter argument to, you have two great players. I anticipate it being a relatively close Heisman vote. So,
sure.
Does Etienne take a few? Because they're not both going to be finalists likely. It's going to be Lawrence that's a finalist, but maybe some voter sits there and looks at, like, say, Justin Fields, for example, who's kind of like the guy at Ohio State. And does Fields playing less games hurt him? Because he's probably going to maybe have a little bit lesser numbers.
Unless he has amazing 8 games, like that's going to count against him, unfortunately.
Because I think it's got to be Trevor Lawrence. I mean, like I said, the big thing for him this year is he has no interceptions. I think last year he struggled a little bit with turnovers. This year he's got 10 touchdown passes, 4 touchdown runs. His stats, they take him out early, so his stats could be even better in terms of his passing stats. But he's right up there for the rating. And I think he's also the name. Like, if it comes down to being close, people know that he's probably going to be the first pick in the NFL draft. So they're probably going to go with Trevor Lawrence. I would say, though, Harris for Alabama would be a sleeper, their running back. I think he has 10 touchdowns already through 3 games. And he has more than 500 rushing yards. And if Alabama's defense struggles a little bit like they have, they're probably going to be in a few more close games, and maybe they're going to lean on him a little bit more. Maybe in the fact that it's an SEC-only schedule, too, he might play some fourth quarters. I remember a few years ago we had with Tua in the Heisman race, and he had the issue of not playing in the fourth quarter because Alabama was up so much. Maybe that won't be an issue this year for Harris. He would be my sort of surprise pick. Not to say that he's coming out of nowhere necessarily, but I think most people have the race between Lawrence and Fields. I don't know who else is a legitimate contender, but I would throw my hat in for Harris in there, Alabama's running back. I will go with Lawrence, though, for the record.
Oh, yeah. We'll bring us some counterpoints, but ultimately we'll go with chalk.
Yeah, we haven't picked as many upsets. We do tend to pick some upsets in the show. And as the show goes on, I'll pick some upsets.
Deeper into the season.
Okay.
For instance, in our next segment, we're all going to go chalk. So
about the MLB?
Yes.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Well, transitioning to the MLB, I think the Rays and Dodgers is likely the World Series matchup.
I had this whole argument about the Dodgers. I have all the stats. They've won the most games the last 5-6 years. They were number one, best record in baseball. They were like top 5 in runs scored and ERA. Kershaw is finally pitching good in the playoffs, even though he got waived today. You have all the statistics point to the Dodgers. They've got the lineup, they've got the pitching staff. However, every time I have picked against the Braves, they have proven me wrong. And I will make an upset prediction here. Since we've been so boring here, the Atlanta Braves will win the World Series. Why is that? Because of pitching. They're giving up like less than a run per game in the postseason, and also clutch hitting. They don't hit very well until we get to about the 9th inning, and they explode for all these 5-run innings out of nowhere. So they're already up 1-0 against the Dodgers. Clayton Kershaw has been scratched for Game 2.
And Game 3. He won't be pitching tomorrow.
Look for the Braves to win Game 2 today and upset the Dodgers. So Drew thought I was going Dodgers. I've been convinced of the Dodgers. But I think the Atlanta Braves are very good in close games, as are the Rays. The Rays, I saw some statistics. The Rays play great defense, and they win close games. I expect to see the Rays getting by the cheaters over there in Houston who can't cheat anymore. And then the Rays losing to the Braves in 7 games. The Atlanta Braves pick up a World Series for the first time since Bobby Cox, Greg Maddux, Tom Glavine, and Smoke.
John Rocker.
John Rocker is the closer.
Oh, keep in mind that the Braves are up 1-0 at this time of taping. So
correct.
It would be an upset, I think, seeding-wise, but is it an upset right now?
I think so. Most people are going. I mean, the Dodgers are the best team in baseball, but I think the Braves are rolling right now.
Sure. Yeah.
They're on a roll. You take the hot hand. Give me the Braves.
Sure.
Tom, what do you think? Have you delved into the research behind this? What is your analysis of baseball this year? Because I have a new favorite baseball player, by the way. Manuel Margot from the Rays. I sat down and watched the Rays-Astros game yesterday. He hit a 3-run homer after Altuve made a crucial error. And then he dove into the stands and made an actual catch where he was diving into the stands holding on. Not one of those fake Derek Jeter catches where he catches the ball, then runs into the stands. He was like jumping in the air practically into the stands, holding on over there right field. The Rays, by the way, made about 3 or 4 like web gem type plays in yesterday's ball game. Tom, what do you think?
So I think it's going to be between the 2 smartest teams, and it's just the only difference between the intelligence of the front offices is Dodgers have money and the Rays don't. So I still think that the Dodgers, after losing the first game 5-1, haven't been knocked out of it. It hurts a lot that Kershaw's not going in Game 2 or Game 3. I think that the Braves have been really, really hot recently. And actually, their pitching's been a bit of an anomaly. Outside of Fried and Ian Anderson, their pitching has actually been pretty poor for the rest of the rotation. So Kyle Wright in Game 3 is going to be, I think, the biggest indicator.
Not in the playoffs.
Not in the playoffs. The playoffs for Kyle Wright, their Game 3 starter, is 1 game. He had a 5.89 ERA over the course of the 60-game season in his start. Yeah. So I think that will be the key after tonight, of course. If they're able to pull off a win against Ian Anderson with, is it Gonsolin going as their starting pitcher for the Dodgers? If they can pull off Game 2, I think that they're definitely going to win. I think that they can still win even if they lose Game 2 and they win Game 3, because I think their depth is just so much greater than what the Braves have, and they're going every single day. So you can't hide bad starting pitching at this point. I think the Dodgers are just too deep. And then Rays, I mean, Drew, you mentioned Braves won last night. They're up 1-0. Rays are already up 2-0, so it's not exactly a bold pick to take them over the Astros. But Tyler Glasnow hasn't even pitched yet. I think it'll be Rays easy to win that one, and I think that the Rays will get their first franchise World Series. I think that'll be a great story for a team that has no fans in the stands, even when it's not COVID.
Yeah. Tampa Bay, and actually it would be interesting because we had Tampa Bay winning the Stanley Cup, and then we could have Tampa Bay winning the World Series, and then all the Super Bowl, and then all the Tom Brady people. And I believe isn't the Super Bowl in Tampa Bay? It
is in Tampa.
So if somehow,
but remember, the World Series is not in Tampa, or it's in what, California or Texas? Remember, they have bubbles now.
No. We're talking about the Super Bowl here.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I'm just saying it could be could set up an epic year for Tampa Bay.
Yes. Yeah, I think the World Series is in Arlington.
Yeah, and one's in San Diego and the other one is in Arlington. I think it's the other way, isn't it? Drew Brackett.
I know we lost Drew.
The series will be in Arlington.
Drew, we had our first moment of losing someone. Technical difficulties. We went through the whole show of hearing each other. We completely missed everything you said in the last 30 seconds.
Am I here?
You're back.
You're here now.
I was going to say the World Series is in Arlington. The ALCS is in San Diego. The NLCS is in Arlington.
Right, that's what I meant. The opposite of AL versus NL ballpark type scenario.
That's all I said during that time. Anyway.
Well, I don't know. I might have to change my pick. The stats do kind of show the Dodgers.
Gosh, we do have a transition opportunity. Speaking of bubbles.
Oh, okay. We could do a transition. I'll tell you this, Tom. Tampa Bay will not win the World Series. As much as I love them, the NL winner will win.
Oh, we'll see. I like the Rays, though. If there's any justice, it'll be the Rays or maybe the Dodgers, since they got jobbed 2 years in a row on the World Series with cheaters.
Well, if there's any justice, it'll be the Dodgers, because they've been the best team in baseball the last 5-6 years without question. They make the NLCS every year. They've won 8 straight divisions. They're in the playoffs every year. Kershaw, though, he hasn't really pitched that well in the playoffs. His ERA is around 4.5 in the playoffs, and it's about half that in the regular season for his career. And I would like to see him win one. And so far, his first start, he threw 8 innings, no runs. Last time out, allowed 3 runs, but he's looked better. So we'll see. Drew, go ahead and transition. He's all about the transitions.
Of course, just transitioning to the bubble, the NBA Finals. Of course, the Los Angeles Lakers winning the championship in Orlando at the ESPN Worldwide Sports complex there.
Who predicted the Lakers? Who did you have, Drew?
Well, I mean, I had the Bucks, but I also percent of experts in America had the Lakers.
No. A lot of people were on the Clippers train, which I was not on the Clippers train. I knew they would choke, and that's because Paul George is one of the most overrated players in professional sports over the last few years, and he's been a proven playoff choker. In fact, not only because of this year and the whole bubble situation, he's been consistently not very good in the playoffs. So I was definitely betting against the Clippers. The Nuggets beating them did not surprise me. Now, did I pick the Clippers to win that series? Yes. But the Nuggets upsetting them was not a surprise. I actually thought the Nuggets would win when it went to 7 games. I just felt that they had the momentum. When it was 3-1, obviously I had the Clippers. So I'll tell you this, though. The bubble was great. No positive tests in the NBA bubble. WNBA bubble also in Florida. They had close to no tests. I think they might have had a couple, actually. But NHL bubble also was a wild success. So I think it's really cool getting these teams in a sort of bubble. And I think hopefully we do something like that with the NCAA tournament as well, for the college kids when we hopefully get there. But the bubble setup has proven to be good, and I watched more basketball. As you know, I'm in between jobs at the moment, so covering local high school sports and Mizzou sports. The last couple of years, I haven't been home at night. I've been covering games. I watched almost all the games, at least the vast majority. Once they got to about the last 4 teams, I watched all the games. And I'll tell you what, guys, the amount of level these NBA athletes are playing has increased significantly in the last 2 years alone. I think you look at what Stephen Curry and James Harden have brought to the game with the three-point shooting and the step backs and the dribbles. You've got role players in the NBA now who can make step back 3 fadeaways with guys in their faces. I mean, this is, a lot of people will hate and say that, this era there's no defense, but if you actually sit down and watch the games, there's a lot of really good defense. There's exceptions, but there's no defense for some teams in college or high school. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, but the athletes are really good. And I was just blown away at the level of play. And you look at Jamal Murray is a perfect example of that. Jamal Murray was not a top 15, top 20 player in the NBA. And in the playoffs, he stepped up and he looked like, a top 10 player in the league. Jimmy Butler, another example. Certainly he's a two-way player, but Butler's offensive game was incredible in the bubble, certainly something he had never done before. So just the sheer shot making was very impressive. I think this year there was more good teams than any year in NBA history. You can argue the Lakers didn't have to face a truly great team, and that might be valid, but I would argue that they had to face more good teams than you typically go through on a playoff run. So it depends on what you're looking at. But I was pretty blown away at the NBA playoffs, level of play, as well as, the system with the bubble and how they didn't let them leave the resorts. They even had, the timer thing? If they got within 6 feet of each other, like a watch would beep, something like that. So kudos to the NBA, the commissioner, who, in my opinion, Silver is the best commissioner in all of sports. The NBA were the first to cancel the seasons with the coronavirus, and they also had the best response to it, having it in one location. Actually, hockey had it in 2 locations, so similar, but NBA kind of went next level. And one of the things that really stood out to me, though, that I thought was very interesting, and then I'll let you talk, Drew. I know you want to say something, Mr. Frozen. There's an obsession with analytics in sports these days. We get obsessed with analytics. What in baseball, it's using your bullpen pitchers. In basketball, now it's all about the three-point shot, all about having 2 superstars. That's kind of where the game has gone. And you look at who was in the NBA Finals. You had the Lakers, who were a mediocre three-point shooting team. I looked up the stats, bottom half of the league, less than average at threes in the regular season and the postseason. You had their 2 superstars who do their best damage. I don't know where Drew went. Do their best damage in the paint in LeBron James and Anthony Davis. And they've got JaVale McGee, Dwight Howard. They rely on rebounding. And, and on the other side, the Heat, while the Heat do shoot the 3-ball well, the Heat had one superstar in Jimmy Butler. And I think prior to these playoffs, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone that said Jimmy Butler is a top 10 player. In fact, the best he's ever done is All-NBA third team. So we live in the era of superstars and three-point shooting, but on one side, we had a team that relied on paint points winning the championship, and on the other side, we had a team that relied on team basketball, which I thought was cool to see, showing that if you're good, you're good. Style doesn't matter as much as people want it to.
Well, I think the obsession with analytics, as you call it, is, definitely warranted, but it's also, it helps us as fans. It tells us what our eyes are already showing us. So, for example, like baseball's the easiest one to see that, because analytics have, taken over the game ever since Billy Beane and Moneyball.
And he still hasn't won, though. And he's going to the Red Sox now. Did you see that?
I haven't seen if that's breaking news. I didn't see it as of us starting up the podcast. But the thing I appreciate about analytics is when they are used properly. Because a team that followed the analytics, the Chicago Bulls, and they did a lot of paint shots and they did a lot of 3-point shots. But if you don't have the team to those analytics, the analytics are useless. You need context around it. So I think like it's fantastic to be able to kind of marry those two worlds together, because it's nice having math that kind of tells us like, hey, yeah, you are seeing a great player, and now we have even more context as to how great they are playing. So I think it's been wonderful to see, and I think a big thing that went into the bubble's success for the level of play, these guys don't have to travel. There's an ESPN magazine story a couple of years back about how many miles and how many hours these guys spend in an airplane going from hotel to hotel. When you get them in a situation where they're able to just play ball, you see their talents truly take over, because now you don't have people that are overly tired, that are jet lagged. I think it's definitely like a great setting. We're not going to keep this all time, obviously, because owners want their ticket sales from the gate. But I think that definitely played a huge role in the quality of play that we saw when everybody came back, and it was a lot of fun to watch.
Scottie Pippen kind of said that too. He was talking about the lack of not having as much pressure. He referenced Rondo, who shot better from the 3-point line this playoffs than he ever has,
right.
Which is another key to the Lakers' success. Is Rondo was kind of their third guy during the key moments. And it was really interesting to see him coming off the bench, coming off an injury, and how well he thrived.
I mean, if you're the Lakers, you have 2 of the top 4 players. Top 5? Okay, top 5 players in the NBA. You have to win the championship. Yeah. Right? I mean, you just have the most talent. You have the most talent on the floor. You have the most experience of any team. You better have won the championship. Absolutely.
Well, I would say that's true, and that's why I picked them, even though you didn't. But I would argue with you that what worked so well for the Lakers and what worked so well for LeBron and Davis is this is the best player he's ever played with together. I think Davis is better than Kyrie Irving ever was. I think maybe for the first year or two, you can argue that Dwayne Wade was a little bit better, but I would.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony Davis is a top 4 or 5 player in the NBA as it stands. Absolutely.
No, but I would argue that he's a better fit with LeBron than Dwayne Wade was, given the fact that Dwayne Wade's more of a perimeter player. So LeBron and Davis rather, worked so well together that it was just a match made in heaven, because the rest of that roster, yes, they have playoff experience, but they're all pretty washed up. I mean, even, Dwight Howard, Rondo, these are big names, but these guys are not at the level they were. Caldwell Pope certainly played pretty well for the Lakers as well, but talent-wise, they really don't have a ton of talent outside of those top 2 guys. I would argue talent-wise, the Clippers might be slightly better overall, but I would say that LeBron James is just that good that it didn't matter, because what LeBron James did in the finals was incredible. Shooting 59%, 28 points, 11 rebounds, 9 assists. Like, he was an absolute beast, and he's 35 years old, and his control of the game is completely impeccul. And I mean,
you have a point. I'm going to interrupt you.
I was blown away at how well LeBron plays. And to me, Giannis winning the MVP was completely ridiculous. I view it the same way as I view soccer and Lionel Messi. LeBron James is the best player in the world. Lionel Messi is the best player in the world. They are the most valuable players every year. We become enamored with other guys. I'm guilty of that. I became enamored with Stephen Curry. And I thought for 1 year, I said to myself, man, Stephen Curry, he might be better than LeBron James. And I was crazy. I mean, it was stupid. So anyone that thinks that LeBron James still is not the best player in the world is insane. I mean, he's transformed his game so much. He led the league in assists this year. He'd never done that before. 35 years old, first time leading the league in assists. And like compared him to Giannis, for example, if you add up LeBron's points and assists, he accounts for more points than Giannis does. And LeBron James can actually, shoot the ball. He's not he's not Stephen Curry, but he's respectable from the outside. That you can't completely shut him down the way Giannis is shut down. LeBron has no weakness. He's a freak of nature. I'll get more on him in my statement.
I mean, he does. He can't shoot free throws. In his 17th year, he's probably still in the 70s. I don't know his
so 75 is about league average. He's about 71, 72 for his career. Yeah. He was about 69% this year, so he's a little bit below average, but he's not Shaquille O'Neal. You still get him to the line you expect him to make.
But that is his weakness. He can't shoot free throws.
I would say it's a very minor.
I would hack a LeBron.
The hack of LeBron doesn't work. No one has tried hack of LeBron, so you can't say it's a weakness. So we have found out that Drew Brackett has the worst internet connection of the three. Kind of speaking to the superiority of the Chicago area compared to North Carolina.
And Castleman's been in and out the whole time.
He looks crystal clear, but we will crown me as the champion of internet connection.
Off the video now. I've given up on the video.
Well, Drew's gone. He's gone.
I'm going to talk, though.
He'll still talk. He's gone, but he'll still talk, folks.
We got our statements of the week coming up, right?
Yeah. Do you want to lead us off, Drew?
Yeah, I'm going no video. But yeah, so my statement of the week, salute to Rafa Nadal.
Yeah.
For the French Open. How about that? Congrats to Nadal. I had more stats on it, but it appears I did not save my document correctly.
Well, he won the French Open without losing a set.
Okay, he won the French Open without losing a set. He's 13-0 in French Open finals. So congrats to him.
100 wins and 2 losses at the French Open. 80, I think it's 81 now of those 102 matches. He's won in straight sets.
No,
all those stats are 100% accurate. The only one that I'm about to give, I'm not 100% sure if it's accurate, but I believe it's the 6th time he's won the French Open without losing a set. And you have Novak Djokovic, who is ranked number 1 in the world. He was undefeated this year, minus the U.S. Open disqualification, where he hit a linesman with a ball on accident. So he was basically undefeated. And Nadal demolished him. Look at Drew raising his hand. We can't even see him.
This is my statement of the week. You interrupted.
I love your statement. I have a follow-up.
That's not the statement, though.
Okay, do your statement.
That was my salute to Rafa Nadal, and then a quarter of the way through, it turned into the Cayman show. All right. So salute to Rafa Nadal, but also tennis fans. Don't take this for granted. The big three are getting older every day. It's been a pleasure to watch possibly the 3 greatest all-time players play all at once for the last 20 years. So if you don't love tennis, watch it to get a glimpse of Roger Federer, Rafa Nadal, and Novak Djokovic. And of course, I bring that up because it was Nadal and Djokovic in the French Open final.
Here's my follow-up, and I would argue with you and say that it's not possibly the 3 greatest players. I would say it's definitely the 3 greatest players in tennis history. They have all the records. I mean, Pete Sampras is 4th in majors. Sampras is 14. Nadal and Federer have 20.
No, it's 20, 20, and 17. I know the statistics, but
20,
for argument's sake, they are likely.
I just want to clarify that it's not possibly. It is without question the 3 greatest players.
I mean, you could say Andy Roddick was the greatest server of all time.
So here's my follow-up. Who ends up with the most majors between Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic? Federer's 39, Nadal is 34, and Djokovic is 33.
Probably Djokovic.
I disagree. I think it's going to be Nadal because the French Open is almost a free major win for him. And he's 3 ahead and only 1 year older. I've got to go with Nadal, as much as it pains me as a Federer fan to say that.
That's fair.
Tom, what do you got?
So I think, Common, that you and I will be in similar arenas right here, but for my statement of the week, of course, with winning the first title, I and many Bulls fans are once again confronted with the question of greatest of all time. I'll spare the pedantics of what great qualifies as. If it's overall greatest career, you have Bill Russell, who won 11 NBA titles and 2 college titles. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was nearly undefeated in his time at UCLA, won 3 championships there, went on to the NBA to win 6 titles and 6 MVPs, and at the time of his retirement, led the league in career numbers for almost every meaningful category.
Well,
if we're going with movies, Space Jam and Airplane are both classics. The fact that I need to look up LeBron James on IMDb says all it needs to on that score. But really, the conversation does come down to Michael Jordan and LeBron James. And as a biased person, it would be fair if I recused myself, but that wouldn't make for very good podcast content, so I will not do that. Simply, I'll say that they have both had incredible careers in different ways, in different eras that do need to be appreciated. Jordan's success, his attitude, and his then outlandish, freakish athleticism is what propelled the NBA to being an international success and making him an icon. LeBron James has been pretty much the ultimate mercenary who pretty much hires himself, winning titles in Miami, Cleveland, and LA by joining up with some of the best talent in the NBA at the time. So he's really redefined kind of what team building is, what player movement does. And you factor that in with the Q rating that he's had since the age of 17 and the pressure that has come with being labeled as the savior.
Ever.
It's been incredible that he's been able to deal with that and not only survive it, but thrive in it. So what it comes down to for me is that I am more of a traditionalist. We were talking earlier, Common, you said you weren't a Colts fan, you're a Peyton Manning fan. For me, I'm a traditionalist who goes with teams. I take the team story and the players on that team over the individual and their career. And with that being said, Michael Jordan, for me, has the perfect archetype of the hero's journey, where he goes to Chicago, overcomes all of these obstacles to attain a peak level of success for a long point in time. So you can throw stats and stories and everything at this, but my statement is that for me, Michael Jordan is still the GOAT.
All righty. I love it. So I'm going to do exactly the same statement, but I'm going to flip it and tell you why LeBron James is the GOAT. So first off, one thing I will say about Michael Jordan and LeBron James, I would argue if you look at the history of sports, you look at hockey, Wayne Gretzky is the GOAT in hockey. Well, a lot of great talks. We just love this show. That'll do it for this week. Salute Your Sports after college, 7.5 years later. We'll have this uploaded for you every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Look forward in that midweek stretch, and we'll see whose predictions are going to be correct. Have a good one, everyone.